Welcome, dear listeners, to another journey through the quieter corridors of history. Tonight, we'll walk together through the shadows of medieval Europe, where the line between healing and harm was often tragically blurred. Find yourself a comfortable position, perhaps adjusting your pillow just so, and allow your breathing to settle into a gentle rhythm as we explore a world both fascinating and distant from our own. Our path tonight will take us through 4 distinct chapters of medieval life, each revealing truths that history books often gloss over with euphemism and distance. We'll begin in the chambers of medieval medicine, where procedures we would recognize as torture were performed with the sincere belief that they would heal. From there, we'll travel eastward to discover a Persian physician whose revolutionary approaches to healing stood in stark contrast to European practices. Our third stop will lead us to investigate one of archaeology's most puzzling mysteries, the bone houses of Europe, where millions of human remains were transformed into elaborate architectural displays. Finally, we'll ascend the social ladder to spend a day in the luxurious world of a medieval bishop, whose daily existence contrasted sharply with the suffering of his flock. These stories remind us that history is not simply a collection of dates and battles, but a tapestry woven from countless individual experiences, moments of pain and healing, discovery and mystery, suffering and privilege. As you listen, imagine yourself settling deeper into the comfort of your modern bed, with its clean sheets and soft pillows, appreciating the gentle blessing of contemporary medical care and the simple luxury of safety. Let these medieval voices from across the centuries serve as a lullaby of sorts, a reminder of how far we've traveled from those darker times. So close your eyes if you wish, and let us begin our journey into the past, where even the most well-intentioned acts could lead to unimaginable consequences, and where the distance between healer and torturer was often measured not in intention, but in knowledge that would take centuries yet to discover. You wake in 13th century Europe with the familiar throb of a headache behind your eyes. The pain has persisted for days now, a constant companion that makes even the simplest tasks feel mountainous. Your family watches with growing concern as you wince at every sound. Shield your eyes from even the faintest candlelight. They whisper among themselves in the corner of your modest dwelling, their voices carrying the weight of worry and a decision you're not yet aware they are making. The village barber surgeon is summoned. You know him by reputation, a man who cuts hair and pulls teeth with equal confidence, who sets broken bones and attempts to cure ailments that seem beyond earthly remedy. His hands are rough from years of work, his tools crude but well used. When he arrives at your bedside, examining your pale complexion and listening to your complaints, his diagnosis comes swiftly. The evil humors have collected in your head, he declares with certainty. They must be released, or worse suffering will surely follow. You have no concept that you're about to undergo what future generations would classify as torture. In your world, this procedure, trepanation, the drilling of holes into the human skull, represents the height of medical sophistication. The surgeon explains the process with the same matter-of-fact tone a modern doctor might use to describe taking your blood pressure. Your skull must be opened to allow the corrupt vapors to escape. It's a logical solution to a medical problem, at least within the framework of medieval understanding. The preparation begins with an almost ceremonial quality. Your family gathers around, not as witnesses to brutality, but as participants in what they genuinely believe will be your salvation. Prayers are offered to various saints known for their healing powers. A rough wooden table is cleared and positioned near the window where the light is strongest. The surgeon unpacks his instruments from a leather satchel, tools that would be equally at home in a carpenter's workshop. You're helped onto the table, your head positioned carefully on a wooden block. Strong hands, those of your brothers, perhaps, or neighbors who've come to help, position themselves at your shoulders and limbs. This isn't restraint born of cruelty, but necessity born of compassion. They know what's coming will test the limits of human endurance, and they are prepared to hold you steady through it. The surgeon begins by cutting away your hair with a blade that's seen better days. The metal scrapes against your scalp, occasionally catching and pulling, sometimes nicking the skin. Each small cut burns like fire, but these are considered inconsequential compared to the greater procedure ahead. Blood from these minor wounds trickles down your forehead, mixing with the sweat of fear and pain. The surgeon wipes it away with a cloth that's been used on countless other patients. The concept of sterile technique still centuries in the future. Now comes the moment that will define the next hour of your existence. The surgeon lifts his trepan, a cylindrical drill with a crown of sharp teeth around its edge. The metal is cold against your bare scalp as he positions it carefully, selecting the spot where he believes the evil humors have concentrated. You can feel the slight indentation as he presses the tool against your skull, preparing for the work ahead. The drilling begins with a grinding sound that seems to emanate from inside your own head. The surgeon applies steady pressure while twisting the instrument, each rotation bringing the metal teeth deeper into your bone. The sensation is unlike anything in your experience. Not simply pain, but a profound wrongness that reverberates through every part of your being. You can feel the vibrations in your teeth, taste something metallic and bitter in your mouth, hear sounds that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Bone dust begins to accumulate around the drill site, creating a gritty paste when mixed with blood and sweat. Some of this debris falls into your eyes, causing them to water and burn. More finds its way into your mouth, coating your tongue with the chalky, bitter taste of your own pulverized skull. The surgeon pauses occasionally to clear away this accumulation, using his fingers or small wooden tool to scrape out the debris. These brief respites offer momentary relief before the grinding resumes. The pain evolves as the drill penetrates deeper. What begins as surface agony transforms into something that seems to reach the very core of your being. Your hands clench involuntarily. Your body strains against the well-meaning restraint of family and neighbors. Occasionally, a whimper or cry escapes your lips, but mostly you endure in silence, partly from courage, partly from shock, and partly because the pain has moved beyond what sound can express. As the drill approaches the inner surface of your skull, the surgeon's movements become more cautious. He's watching for signs that is nearly through. Changes in the resistance of the bone, subtle shifts in the sound of the drilling. Too little, and the procedure will be incomplete. Too much, and he might damage what lies beneath. His experience guides him, accumulated over years of performing this same operation on others who've lain where you lie now. Finally, after what feels like hours but is likely only minutes, the drill breaks through. The surgeon lifts away a circular piece of your skull, perhaps the size of a coin, revealing the delicate membrane that protects your brain. You're still conscious, still aware, as he examines his work. The sight of your own skull fragment, bloody and roughly circular, adds a surreal quality to an already nightmarish experience. But trepanation represents only one facet of medieval medical practice. If you survive this procedure, other treatments await. Bloodletting might follow, the opening of veins to drain what physicians believe is corrupted blood. You'd watch as your life force flows into ceramic bowls, the surgeon monitoring your condition for signs that the bad humors are departing. The procedure continues until you feel faint and weak, which is interpreted as proof of its effectiveness. Cauterization awaits those suffering from wounds or mysterious growths. Iron rods are heated in the fire until they glow with white-hot intensity, then pressed directly against flesh to burn away diseased tissue. The sizzling sound of your own skin, the acrid smell of burning meat, the unimaginable agony as heated metal sears through layers of tissue, all accepted as necessary steps toward healing. For ailments of the stomach or bowels, mercury might be prescribed. This liquid metal burns as it travels down your throat, causing immediate and severe reactions. Your mouth fills with saliva that you cannot control, your gums swell and bleed, your teeth become loose in their sockets. To medieval physicians, these symptoms indicate that the medicine is working, driving out the corruption that has taken hold within your body. Your daily existence, if you survive these treatments, becomes a careful navigation between illness and cure. Leeches attach to your skin like living jewelry, their dark bodies swelling as they draw out blood the physicians believe to be tainted. Enemas are administered with primitive equipment that causes as much damage as relief. Herbal concoctions burn your throat and induce violent vomiting that leaves you weak and dehydrated for days. The most heartbreaking aspect of this medical reality isn't simply the physical agony, but the framework of belief that surrounds it. You live in a world where illness is understood as punishment for sin or evidence of spiritual corruption. Every moment of suffering feels deserved, every treatment a form of divine judgment that must be endured with patience and faith. The physicians who torture you do so with genuine compassion, believing absolutely in the necessity of their methods. Recovery, when it occurs, happens despite the treatments rather than because of them. Your wounds are dressed with bandages that have been used on other patients, introducing new infections to complicate your healing. Your surgical sites become breeding ground for bacteria that no one yet knows exist. Your weakened body fights not only your original ailment but also the complications introduced by well-intentioned medical intervention. This is the reality of medieval medicine, a world where healing and harming are indistinguishable, where good intentions pave roads to agony, and where survival depends more on individual resilience than medical knowledge. Every headache carries the threat of skull drilling. Every fever might trigger bloodletting until collapse. Every wound could mean the burning kiss of white-hot iron against vulnerable flesh. The physicians who practice these methods are not monsters, but men limited by their time and knowledge. They work within frameworks of understanding that make perfect sense given what they know about the human body and the nature of disease. Their tools are crude because metallurgy hasn't yet advanced beyond basic techniques. Their understanding of anatomy is flawed because dissection is forbidden by religious law. Their concept of infection is non-existent because the microscopic world remains invisible to them. Yet within this landscape of medical horror, human compassion still finds expression. Families gather to support loved ones through procedures they cannot understand but believe to be necessary. Physicians develop techniques to minimize pain within the constraints of their knowledge. Patients endure unimaginable suffering with courage that speaks to the resilience of the human spirit. The contrast with our modern world is almost incomprehensible. You lie now in comfort that would seem miraculous to a medieval patient. Clean sheets, effective pain relief, antibiotics that can cure infections that once meant certain death. The headache that might have once led to skull drilling now responds to simple medications available without prescription. The luxury of medical safety, so common that we rarely consider it, represents centuries of accumulated knowledge built upon the suffering of countless individuals who had no choice but to endure what seemed like torture in the name of healing. As you drift towards sleep in your comfortable bed, perhaps you can offer a moment of gratitude for the distance we've traveled from those dark centuries when the difference between doctor and torturer was measured not in intent, but in understanding that humanity was still struggling to acquire. While European physicians were drilling holes in skulls and burning flesh with heated irons, far to the east, in the golden age of Islamic civilization, a remarkable man was quietly revolutionizing the practice of medicine. His name was Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi, though history knows him simply as al-Razi, and his story unfolds like a gentle counterpoint to the medical horrors we've just witnessed. Picture, if you will, the city of Ray in the 9th century, nestled in the shadows of the Alborz Mountains near what we now call Tehran. The year is around 854, and into this world of bustling markets and centers of learning is born a child who will grow to challenge everything medieval Europe believes about healing and medicine. But al-Razi's path to medical greatness begins not with anatomy texts or surgical instruments, but with music. As a young man, al-Razi's passion flows through his fingertips as he plays the lute. The delicate melodies that emerge from his instrument echo through the courtyards of Ray, earning him recognition as a skilled musician and composer. For years, music defines his world. The careful positioning of fingers on strings, the subtle variations in rhythm and tone that can move listeners to tears or joy. His hands are his livelihood, his sensitivity to sound and touch his greatest assets. But time, that relentless sculptor of human ambition, begins to work its changes on al-Razi's fingers. Age brings stiffness to joints once fluid, uncertainty to movements once precise. The fear that haunts every musician begins to creep into his daily practice, the gradual loss of the dexterity that has defined his identity. Faced with the prospect of a musical career cut short, Al-Razi makes a decision that will reshape the course of medical history. He turns his brilliant, analytical mind toward alchemy, and from there, to the healing arts. This transition from music to medicine reveals something profound about Al-Razi's character. Where others might see only loss, he perceives opportunity. The same attention to detail that served him in music, the same patience required to master complex compositions, the same sensitivity to subtle variations that made him an exceptional lute player, all these qualities transfer seamlessly to his new calling. The fingers that once coaxed melodies from strings now learn to detect the subtle rhythms of human pulse, the delicate variations that speak of health or illness. Al-Razi's approach to medical learning stands in stark contrast to the methods employed in medieval Europe. While European physicians memorize ancient texts without question, accepting the wisdom of long-dead authorities as immutable truth, Al-Razi insists on observation and experimentation. He believes that truth emerges not from dusty scrolls but from careful attention to the world around him, from systematic testing of ideas against reality. When the opportunity arises to establish a teaching hospital in Baghdad, Al-Razi approaches the task with a methodical precision that characterizes all his work. The selection of the hospital's location becomes itself a medical experiment. He hangs pieces of raw meat in different areas of the city, observing carefully as the days pass. Some pieces rot quickly, others more slowly. The location where the meat stays fresh longest becomes the site for his hospital, an early recognition that environmental factors play a crucial role in health and healing. This hospital represents something unprecedented in the medieval world. Unlike the crude treatment centers of Europe, where patients are subjected to bloodletting and skull drilling, Al-Razi's institution focuses on careful observation and gentle treatment. The wards are kept clean, patients are treated with dignity and compassion, and medical students learn through hands-on experience rather than rote memorization. Al-Razi's approach to patient care reveals his revolutionary understanding of healing. He recognizes that a physician's manner and attitude can be as important as any medicine. He spends time talking with patients, understanding their fears and concerns, recognizing that mental state and physical health are intimately connected. This psychological insight, taken for granted in modern medicine, represents a profound departure from medieval European practice, where patients are often treated as passive recipients of medical intervention. One of Al-Razi's most famous cases illustrates his innovative approach to psychological healing. A young nobleman falls into a deep depression following a romantic disappointment and refuses to walk, claiming his legs no longer function. European physicians might prescribe bloodletting or trepanation, assuming that corrupted humors have affected his brain. But Al-Razi suspects the problem is psychological rather than physical. He devises an elaborate therapeutic deception. Visiting the young man's bedside, Al-Razi pretends to conduct a thorough examination of the supposedly paralyzed legs. Suddenly, he begins shouting that he has discovered a terrible disease that requires immediate and drastic treatment. The shock of this announcement causes the patient to leap from his bed and flee in terror, demonstrating conclusively that his legs function perfectly. The psychological cure succeeds where physical intervention would have failed, and Al-Razi has demonstrated the power of understanding the mind's influence on the body. Al-Razi's contributions to the understanding of infectious diseases represent perhaps his greatest legacy. He becomes the first physician to clearly differentiate between smallpox and measles, two conditions that European doctors treat as variations of the same disease. His descriptions of symptoms are so precise and detailed that they remain medically accurate centuries later. Where European physicians attribute these illnesses to divine punishment or imbalanced humors, Al-Razi recognizes them as distinct conditions requiring different approaches to treatment. His written account of smallpox reads with the clarity and precision of modern medical literature. He describes the initial fever, the characteristic rash, the progression of symptoms, and the various outcomes patients might experience. He notes that those who survive the disease rarely contract it again, an early observation of acquired immunity that won't be understood in Europe for centuries. His treatment recommendations emphasize supportive care, proper nutrition, and maintaining patient comfort, a stark contrast to the aggressive interventions favored by his European contemporaries. The Persian physician's surgical techniques demonstrate remarkable sophistication. He develops the use of animal gut for sutures, understanding intuitively that these materials will dissolve naturally in the body, eliminating the need for removal. He employs opium as an anesthetic, recognizing that surgery need not be an exercise in torture. His cataract surgery techniques allow patients to regain sight without the brutal methods employed elsewhere, and he successfully performs complex procedures to remove kidney stones while European surgeons are still cauterizing wounds with red-hot iron. Al-Razi's pharmaceutical knowledge encompasses hundreds of medicines, both natural and synthetic. Unlike European physicians who poison patients with crude mercury preparations, he understands proper dosages and preparation methods. He creates pills, ointments, and syrups that actually help patients rather than harm them. His experimental approach leads him to test each remedy carefully, documenting both successes and failures with equal precision. Perhaps most revolutionary is Al-Razi's approach to medical education. He believes that medicine should be taught through direct experience with patients rather than memorization of ancient texts. Students in his hospital learn by observing real cases, discussing symptoms and treatments, participating in the actual practice of healing. This clinical approach to medical training won't appear in European universities until the Renaissance, centuries later. His written works represent an extraordinary intellectual achievement. Al-Razi authors over 200 books and treatises covering medicine, chemistry, philosophy, and other subjects. His masterwork, Al-E, or the Comprehensive Book on Medicine, spans 25 volumes and represents the most complete medical encyclopedia of its time. When this work is eventually translated into Latin, it becomes one of the most important medical texts in medieval Europe, though its revolutionary insights are often misunderstood or ignored. The Persian physician also makes significant contributions to medical ethics, writing extensively about the responsibilities physicians bear toward their patients. He emphasizes honesty, compassion, and continuous learning. Al-Razi believes that doctors should admit when they don't understand something rather than pretend to omniscience, a marked contrast to the arrogant certainty displayed by many European physicians who torture patients based on flawed theories. His understanding of contagion proves remarkably advanced. Al-Razi recognizes that certain diseases spread from person to person and develops early quarantine procedures. He establishes separate wards for different types of patients and implements cleaning protocols that won't become standard in Europe until the 19th century. These innovations save countless lives, though their importance won't be fully appreciated until the development of germ theory. Perhaps most importantly, Al-Razi documents his failures as carefully as his successes. He believes that learning from mistakes represents a crucial component of medical advancement. His case studies include detailed descriptions of treatments that didn't work, symptoms he misdiagnosed, and procedures that caused harm. This scientific honesty is virtually unknown in medieval Europe, where physicians rarely admit error or uncertainty. The contrast between Al-Razi's methods and contemporary European practice creates one of history's most profound ironies. While he develops humane, effective treatments in 10th century Persia, European physicians continue practicing medical torture for centuries afterward. His works are eventually translated into Latin, but the full impact of his revolutionary approaches isn't felt in Europe until the Renaissance. By then, countless European patients have suffered needlessly from treatments that the Persian physician had already proven ineffective centuries earlier. Al-Razi's personal life reflects the same thoughtful approach that characterizes his medical practice. He remains curious about the world around him, studying astronomy, chemistry, and philosophy with equal dedication. His home becomes a center of learning where students and scholars gather to discuss ideas and share knowledge. He treats everyone, regardless of social status or religious background, with the same respect and attention he shows his patients. The physician's later years bring a poignant irony. The man who developed advanced cataract surgery techniques gradually loses his own sight to the same condition. Some accounts suggest that he refuses treatment, perhaps understanding that the surgical techniques of his time, while advanced, still carry significant risks. He spends his final years nearly blind, dictating his observations and continuing to teach despite his disability. Al-Razi dies around 925 CE, having lived to see many of his medical innovations adopted throughout the Islamic world. His students carry on his work, establishing hospitals and medical schools that employ his methods. His written works survive and continue to influence medical practice for centuries. The foundation he lays for scientific medicine, based on observation and experimentation rather than blind acceptance of authority, represents a crucial step toward modern healthcare. The legacy of Al-Razi extends far beyond his immediate contributions to medicine. He demonstrates that healing can be both effective and humane, that scientific inquiry and compassionate care are not opposing forces but complementary aspects of good medical practice. His life serves as a reminder that progress often occurs not through dramatic breakthroughs but through the patient accumulation of knowledge and the willingness to question established beliefs. As we settle deeper into our comfortable beds, surrounded by the benefits of modern medicine, we might spare thought for this remarkable Persian physician who showed that medicine need not be torture, that healing could be both scientific and kind. His story offers a gentle counterpoint to the medical horrors of medieval Europe, a reminder that even in humanity's darkest hours, there are always those who choose to kindle lights of knowledge and compassion. The soft rhythm of your breathing, the warmth of clean sheets, the simple comfort of knowing that effective, painless medical care is available if needed. These represent the culmination of a journey that began over 1,000 years ago with a musician-turned-physician who believed that healing should be gentle, that knowledge should be tested against reality, and that medicine at its best serves not to punish but to restore. Across the medieval landscape of Europe, archaeologists have uncovered one of history's most puzzling mysteries, a phenomenon so widespread and yet so enigmatic that it continues to challenge our understanding of medieval society, religious practice, and the relationship between the living and the dead. Imagine walking through the countryside of the Czech Republic, Austria, or Portugal, and discovering buildings constructed entirely from human bones, millions upon millions of carefully arranged skulls, femurs, and ribcage transformed into architectural masterpieces that both fascinate and disturb the modern mind. The mystery begins with absence rather than presence. Archaeological surveys of medieval cemetery sites reveal something that shouldn't exist: empty graves. Ground-penetrating radar shows the clear outlines of burial plots, the organized rows of graves that should contain the remains of generations of the faithful. Yet when archaeologists carefully excavate these sites, they find only empty earth, or at most, scattered fragments of bone too small to identify. The bodies that should rest there have simply vanished, leaving behind only the ghostly impressions of their former resting places. This absence becomes even more mysterious when contrasted with what stands nearby. Within walking distance of these emptied graveyards rise some of the most elaborate displays of human remains in history: chapels, crypts, and churches where millions of bones have been arranged with artistic precision that rivals the greatest architectural achievements of the medieval period. These are the bone houses of Europe, and their existence poses questions that archaeologists and historians are still struggling to answer. Consider the Sedlec ossuary in the Czech Republic, a small chapel that contains the carefully arranged remains of between 40,000 and 70,000 human beings. As you enter this sacred space, your eyes adjust to reveal an interior unlike anything else in human experience. Chandeliers constructed from every bone in the human body hang from the vaulted ceiling, their intricate arrangements creating shadows that dance across walls decorated with pyramids of skulls. Coats of arms, spelled out in carefully selected bones, display heraldic symbols with the same precision found in illuminated manuscripts. The bones themselves are bleached to an uniform white, their surfaces smooth and clean, arranged with an artistic sensibility that speaks of decades, perhaps centuries, of careful work. The Hallstatt ossuary in Austria presents a different but equally remarkable approach to bone display. Here, hundreds of skulls line the walls, each one individually decorated with flowers, names, and dates painted in delicate detail. The artwork transforms these remnants of mortality into something approaching celebration, as if death itself has been beautified through artistic intervention. The personal touches, a painted rose here, a carefully inscribed name there, suggest that these were not anonymous remains but cherished ancestors whose memory was being honored through display. In Portugal, the Bone Chapel of Évora presents perhaps the most comprehensive integration of human remains into architectural structure. Complete skeletons are embedded directly into the walls, their empty eye sockets gazing out at visitors with silent testimony to mortality. The pillars supporting the roof are constructed entirely from carefully stacked bones, each element selected and positioned with the precision of a master stonemason working with traditional materials. The official explanation for these bone houses focuses on practical necessities. As medieval towns grew and populations increased, cemetery space became precious. The church needed room for new burials, so older remains were exhumed and moved to dedicated storage areas. This practice, known as the translation of relics, was sanctioned by church authorities as both practically necessary and spiritually meaningful. The bones of the dead were not being discarded but honored through careful preservation and display. Yet this practical explanation fails to account for several puzzling aspects of the bone house phenomenon. The sheer scale of the undertaking staggers the imagination. Moving millions of human remains from their original resting places and arranging them in complex artistic patterns would have required an enormous investment of time, labor, and resources. Medieval communities, already struggling with the basic necessities of survival, somehow found the means to engage in what amounts to one of the largest public works projects in European history. The artistic sophistication of many bone arrangements suggests that this was far more than mere storage. The creators of these displays clearly possessed detailed knowledge of anatomy, understanding which bones would provide the best structural support, which would create the most striking visual effects, and how to arrange them in patterns that would remain stable over centuries. The work required not just manual labor but artistic vision, technical expertise, and an aesthetic sensibility that speaks to profound cultural meaning beyond simple practicality. Archaeological evidence reveals intriguing patterns in bone selection and arrangement. In many ossuaries, only certain types of bones appear in the decorative displays. Skulls and long bones, femurs, tibias, and humeri are heavily favored, while smaller bones like ribs, vertebrae, and foot bones are often absent or used only as fill material. This selective use suggests that the creators were following specific guidelines, perhaps aesthetic, perhaps symbolic, that determined which bones were suitable for display and which were not. Chemical analysis of the bones provides additional clues about their treatment and origins. Many specimens show evidence of deliberate cleaning and bleaching, indicating that they were processed specifically for display purposes rather than simply moved from their original burial sites. Some bones bear tool marks suggesting they were modified to fit particular architectural requirements, shortened, carved, or shaped to serve specific structural functions. Carbon dating reveals that bones from different time periods were sometimes mixed together in single displays, indicating that the creators were drawing from multiple cemetery sites and possibly multiple generations of burials. The timing of bone house creation raises additional questions about their purpose and meaning. Many of these structures were built during periods of extraordinary social upheaval, plagues, famines, and wars that killed massive numbers of people in relatively short periods. The Black Death alone killed approximately one-third of Europe's population in the 14th century, creating a crisis of mortality that overwhelmed traditional burial practices. Some historians suggest that the bone houses were responses to these mass mortality events, ways of coping with death on an unprecedented scale. The religious significance of these bone displays adds another layer of complexity to the mystery. Medieval Christianity held complex and sometimes contradictory beliefs about the resurrection of the dead and the sacred nature of human remains. Church doctrine taught that physical bodies would be resurrected at the final judgment, making the integrity of human remains a matter of theological importance. Disturbing graves was generally forbidden, making the mass exhumation required for bone houses religiously problematic. Yet church authorities not only permitted but actively supported and sometimes initiated these projects. Some theologians of the period interpreted the bone houses as massive memento mori, reminders of death designed to encourage spiritual reflection among the living. Visitors to these sites would be confronted with the undeniable reality of mortality, hopefully inspiring them to live more devout lives and prepare their soul for the afterlife. The artistic arrangement of bones could be seen as transforming death from something fearsome into something beautiful, suggesting spiritual transformation and the promise of redemption. Recent archaeological discoveries have added new dimensions to the mystery. Excavations beneath several bone churches have revealed evidence of much earlier structures, possibly pre-Christian temples or burial sites dating back centuries before the construction of the ossuaries. This suggests that some bone houses were built on locations with ancient sacred significance, possibly incorporating much older human remains into their displays. The continuity of sacred use across different religious traditions adds depth to our understanding of these sites as places where the boundary between life and death, past and present, becomes permeable. Ground-penetrating radar surveys of medieval cemetery sites continue to reveal anomalies that challenge simple explanations for bone house creation. Some areas show evidence of systematic excavation followed by careful refilling, suggesting that bone removal was planned and organized rather than haphazard. Other sites show signs of selective excavation, with only certain graves being emptied while others remained undisturbed. The patterns suggest that decisions about which remains to move were based on criteria we don't yet understand. Perhaps the age of the burial, the social status of the deceased, or other factors that made some bones more suitable for display than others. The social implications of the bone house phenomenon prove equally intriguing. Creating these displays required unprecedented levels of community cooperation. Families had to consent to having their ancestors' remains disturbed and moved. Artisans had to develop new techniques for working with human bones as construction materials. Religious authorities had to reconcile the practice with church doctrine and provide theological justification for what might otherwise be seen as desecration. The bone houses represent one of the largest coordinated community efforts in medieval European history, suggesting social cohesion and shared purpose that challenges common assumptions about medieval society as fragmented and chaotic. Modern attempts to understand the bone houses face significant methodological challenges. Much of the original documentation has been lost over the centuries, and the people who created these displays left remarkably few written records of their motivations, methods, or symbolic intentions. The bones themselves have been moved, rearranged, and sometimes damaged over the centuries, making original analysis difficult. Tourist visits and conservation efforts, while well-intentioned, have sometimes altered the original arrangements, making it challenging to determine what patterns were original and which represent later modifications. DNA analysis of bone house specimens has revealed surprising diversity in the origins of the remains. Some skulls show evidence of violent death, others of disease, and many of natural causes. The demographic mix includes men, women, and children from various social classes, suggesting that the bone houses represented entire communities rather than select groups. Isotope analysis indicates that some remains come from people who live their entire lives in the local area, while others show evidence of travel or migration, suggesting that bone house creators drew from diverse populations. The artistic traditions evident in bone house construction show influences from multiple cultural sources. Some arrangements echo Islamic geometric patterns, possibly transmitted through trade contacts or crusade experiences. Others reflect pre-Christian symbolic traditions that survived in folk art and architectural decoration. Still others appear to be original innovations, unique solutions to the unprecedented challenge of creating meaningful displays from human remains. The preservation state of many bone house displays raises questions about medieval construction techniques and long-term planning. The fact that these arrangements have survived for centuries suggests sophisticated understanding of structural engineering and preservation methods. The builders understood how to create stable arrangements that would withstand time, weather, and the natural settling that affects all architectural structures. This technical knowledge had to be developed specifically for working with human bones, as traditional construction materials behave differently under stress and environmental pressure. The geographical distribution of bone houses across Europe reveals interesting patterns that may provide clues to their origins and spread. The phenomenon appears most concentrated in Central Europe, particularly in regions that experienced heavy mortality during the plague years. However, Examples exist throughout the continent, from the famous catacombs of Paris to smaller displays in remote rural churches. The distribution suggests that bone house creation was not confined to any single cultural or political region, but represented a widespread European response to shared challenges. The mystery of Europe's bone houses continues to evolve as new archaeological techniques provide fresh insights into these remarkable structures. Each excavation reveals new questions about medieval attitudes toward death, community organization, and religious practice. Ground-penetrating radar, chemical analysis, and DNA studies offer tools that previous generations of researchers lacked. Yet the fundamental questions remain. Why did medieval Europeans undertake such massive projects? What meanings did they attach to these displays? How did communities organize such complex undertakings? These macabre monuments remain as puzzling today as they were magnificent in their time, silent testimony to forgotten beliefs and vanished ways of understanding mortality and memory. They remind us that the medieval world contained depths of meaning and complexity that we are still struggling to comprehend, that our ancestors found ways to transform even death itself into art, and that the boundary between the sacred and the disturbing was drawn quite differently in ages past. As you rest comfortably in your bed tonight, perhaps you can appreciate the simple luxury of knowing where your ancestors rest, of living in a world where the dead remain peacefully buried rather than transformed into architectural decoration. The bone houses of Europe stand as monuments to a different relationship with mortality, one where death was not hidden away but celebrated, displayed, and woven into the very fabric of daily life. Their mystery reminds us that history contains depths we have yet to fathom, and that even in our modern world of advanced archaeology and scientific analysis, the past retains its power to surprise, puzzle, and humble our assumptions about what we think we know. While common medieval Europeans endured medical torture, struggled with disease, and witnessed their ancestors' bones transformed into architectural displays, there existed another world entirely, one of extraordinary luxury, political power, and material comfort that would seem almost incomprehensible to the suffering masses. To understand the full complexity of medieval society, we must ascend the social ladder to explore the daily existence of those who wielded both spiritual and temporal authority. Imagine yourself as a medieval bishop in 14th century France, and discover how profoundly different your reality would be from that of your flock. Your day begins before dawn, but not with the harsh tolling of church bells that summons common folk to labor. Instead, your personal chaplain approaches your bedside with the gentle deference due to your exalted position. Your private chambers occupy more space than most noble families possess for their entire households, furnished with luxuries that represent the accumulated wealth of generations. The bed in which you rest is itself a masterpiece of medieval craftsmanship. Carved oak posts rise toward a ceiling painted with religious scenes, while silk curtains imported from distant Constantinople can be drawn to create a private sanctuary within your sanctuary. Your mattress, stuffed with the finest goose down and covered in linen so soft it might have been woven by angels, cradles your body with comfort that most of your contemporaries cannot even imagine. The wooden frame beneath displays intricate carvings depicting biblical scenes, but what catches the morning light is the gold leaf that decorates every surface, precious metal applied with such liberal hand that its cost could feed entire villages for months. Even your sleep represents wealth beyond the dreams of common people. As consciousness gradually returns, you become aware of the morning ablutions that await. Water arrives in copper basins that gleam like mirrors, heated to the perfect temperature and scented with exotic spices carried along trade routes from the Holy Land. The water itself represents luxury, clean, warm, and abundant. While common people make do with whatever they can draw from wells or streams, regardless of season or weather, your personal servants, themselves living in comfort that exceeds that of most free peasants, attend to your every need with practiced efficiency. The ritual of dressing reveals the extraordinary nature of your daily existence. Layer upon layer of the finest cloth is arranged upon your body with ceremonial precision. First come the linen undergarments, woven from fibers so fine they feel like silk against your skin. Then the silk dalmatic, its fabric shimmering with threads that have traveled thousands of miles to reach your wardrobe. Finally, the magnificent chasuble, embroidered with gold thread and encrusted with precious stones that catch and reflect the morning light. Each piece of your vestments represents wealth sufficient to purchase farms, livestock, and the livelihoods of entire families. As you prepare for the day ahead, your chamberlain provides a briefing that reveals the complex web of responsibilities and powers that define your position. You are not merely a spiritual leader, but a feudal lord controlling vast territories, a political player in royal courts, and a business magnate overseeing agricultural estates, mills, workshops, and trade enterprises that span multiple kingdoms. Your diocese generates income that rivals that of kings, and managing this wealth requires administrative sophistication that would impress modern corporate executives. Your first official duty involves celebrating morning mass, but this bears little resemblance to the humble services conducted in village churches. The cathedral where you officiate represents one of the architectural marvels of the medieval world, its soaring arches and magnificent stained glass windows creating an atmosphere of divine presence that overwhelms the senses. The altar before which you stand contains precious metals and jewels worth more than most kingdoms' annual revenues, while the religious artifacts surrounding you represent artistic treasures collected from across the known world. The Mass itself creates a profound irony that you have learned to navigate with practiced ease. As you recite prayers for the poor and humble, your vestments cost more than most people's homes. The chalice from which you drink the consecrated wine is crafted from solid gold and encrusted with rubies that gleam like drops of divine blood. The contrast between Christian teachings about poverty and humility and the opulent reality of your daily existence requires a form of mental compartmentalization that has become second nature. Following Mass, you retire to your private dining hall for a breakfast that would astonish even wealthy nobles. Multiple courses arrive on silver plates polished to mirror brightness, fresh bread made from the finest wheat, exotic fruits preserved in honey and imported from distant lands, various meats including peacock and swan prepared by master chefs whose culinary skills are legendary throughout the region. Wine from the best vineyards in France accompanies each course, while your personal cook creates dishes that most people will never even see, let alone taste. The morning hours bring administrative duties that reveal the true scope of your temporal power. Reports arrive from stewards managing dozens of agricultural estates scattered across your diocese, each document detailing revenues from lands where peasants owe you not just tithes but labor service, rent payments, and various feudal obligations. You own mills where all grain must be ground, ovens where all bread must be baked, and even bridges where tolls must be paid by anyone crossing. Your wealth flows not primarily from spiritual service, but from extensive business operations that touch every aspect of economic life within your territories. Your schedule includes judicial responsibilities that highlight your unique position as both religious and secular authority. You hear legal cases involving church property, resolve marriage disputes that affect inheritance and political alliances, and adjudicate accusations of heresy that can mean the difference between life and death for the accused. Your judgments carry the weight of both canon and civil law, backed by the power to excommunicate enemies, placing their souls in spiritual jeopardy, or grant indulgences that promise reduced suffering in purgatory. This spiritual authority translates directly into political influence and economic advantage. Mid-morning brings meetings with fellow ecclesiastical officials that reveal the complex politics operating within church hierarchy. You discuss appointments to lucrative parish positions, negotiate territorial disputes between dioceses, and plan strategies for dealing with royal demands for ecclesiastical taxes. The church operates as a parallel government with its own bureaucracy, treasury, and diplomatic corps. And as a bishop, you function as a key player in this shadow state that often rivals secular authority in power and influence. Your correspondence reveals the international scope of medieval church politics. Letters arrive from Rome regarding papal policy and political maneuvering, from other bishops seeking alliances for various initiatives, and from royal courts requesting your support for military campaigns, tax levies, or diplomatic negotiations. You maintain a sophisticated intelligence network that keeps you informed about political developments across Europe, understanding that information represents power and that both must be wielded with considerable skill. The afternoon often involves receiving visitors who seek your favor, assistance, or blessing for their enterprises. Wealthy nobles request your spiritual endorsement for their military campaigns, offering generous donations to your cathedral-building fund in exchange for divine approval. Merchants seek your protection for their trade routes, knowing that excommunication could ruin their business relationships overnight. Even kings treat you with careful respect, understanding that your spiritual authority can legitimize or undermine their political power depending on your inclination. Your episcopal palace functions as a center of cultural activity that rivals the most sophisticated royal courts. Scholars and artists seek your patronage, creating illuminated manuscripts of breathtaking beauty, composing musical works that glorify both God and your own magnificence, and developing architectural innovations for your various building projects. Your library contains rare texts gathered from across the known world, while your scriptorium employs dozens of skilled scribes copying important works. You are not merely consuming culture but actively creating it, shaping the intellectual and artistic life of your age. The day's grandest meal arrives with evening, often served to dozens of guests including nobles, wealthy merchants, and visiting church officials. The feast includes exotic delicacies that push the boundaries of culinary possibility. Roasted peacock served with its feathers artfully reattached, elaborate sugar sculptures that represent weeks of skilled labor, and wines from vineyards whose names are spoken with reverence by connoisseurs across Europe. Entertainment includes professional musicians whose talents would grace royal courts, poets who compose verses in your honor, and sometimes theatrical performances that blend religious instruction with sophisticated artistry. These dinners represent political events where alliances are forged and business conducted over multiple courses of luxury foods. Conversations flow between languages as guests discuss trade opportunities, military campaigns, theological disputes, and marriage negotiations that will affect the balance of power across multiple kingdoms. Your position at the head of the table reflects not just ceremonial honor but real authority. Your opinions carry weight that can influence the fate of nations. Evening hours might find you in your private study, working on theological treatises that will influence church doctrine for generations, or crafting political correspondence that shapes the relationship between spiritual and temporal authority. Your desk represents a masterpiece of medieval craftsmanship, rare woods inlaid with ivory and precious metals, its surface large enough to accommodate multiple manuscripts simultaneously. The candles providing illumination are made from the finest beeswax rather than the tallow that common people use, their steady flame revealing writing materials that represent luxury beyond most people's imagination. Your personal chapel, where you conduct private prayers away from public scrutiny, contains artistic treasures that would anchor museum collections today. Reliquaries supposedly containing pieces of the true cross or bones of saints are crafted from gold and encrusted with precious stones whose value exceeds the annual income of entire kingdoms. The prayer books you use represent illuminated manuscripts created by master artists over years of painstaking work, the pages decorated with images of such beauty that viewing them becomes itself a form of worship. As you prepare to retire for the evening, servants attend to your needs with a level of personal care typically reserved for royalty. Your bedchamber is heated with expensive charcoal braziers that maintain perfect temperature regardless of external weather. Your nightclothes are woven from silk so fine it seems to float against your skin, and your bed linens are changed daily, an unimaginable luxury in an age when most people own only the clothes they wear. Even your sleep is cushioned by wealth and privilege that separates you completely from the common people you are supposedly called to serve. The contrast between your daily existence and that of your flock creates one of the most profound ironies in medieval society. While you preach about spiritual poverty and humble service, you live in luxury that exceeds that of most secular rulers. Your wealth, accumulated through centuries of church authority and careful investment, creates a lifestyle that seems to contradict the fundamental teachings of Christianity. Yet this contradiction has become so normalized within church structure that it rarely generates internal conflict or public criticism. Your prayers for the souls of common people are offered from golden altars worth more than their villages. your charity dispensed from treasuries overflowing with wealth extracted from their labor, and your spiritual guidance delivered from towers of privilege that make understanding their struggles nearly impossible. The medical torture they endure, the economic hardship that defines their existence, the social oppression that limits their opportunities, all of this remains abstract to you, filtered through reports and statistics rather than experienced directly. The administrative apparatus that supports your lifestyle requires hundreds of employees, from personal servants to estate managers to armed guards who protect your wealth and enforce your authority. These individuals, while enjoying better conditions than most peasants, still live in a world far removed from your daily experience. They see your luxury from the perspective of those who maintain it rather than those who enjoy it, understanding intimately the vast resources required to sustain even a single day of your existence. Your relationship with secular authority reflects the complex balance of power that characterizes medieval society. Kings and nobles treat you with respect born not just of religious obligation, but of practical recognition that your wealth and influence can significantly affect their own political fortunes. You can mobilize resources for military campaigns, provide sanctuary for political refugees, or excommunicate rulers whose policies conflict with church interests. This temporal power, combined with your spiritual authority, makes you one of the most influential individuals in European society. The education that prepared you for this position represents one of the finest intellectual traditions available in the medieval world. You are likely fluent in Latin, familiar with classical philosophy and theology, and trained in the complex legal traditions that govern both church and secular affairs. Your library contains works that preserve and transmit the accumulated knowledge of Western civilization, while your correspondence connects you to scholarly networks that span the continent. Yet this intellectual sophistication coexists with the same medical beliefs that subject common people to torture in the name of healing. You accept bloodletting and trepanation as legitimate medical practices, view disease as divine punishment for sin, and rely on prayer and relics for protection against illness. Your wealth can purchase the best medical care available, but best in your era still means treatments that future generations will recognize as barbaric. The seasonal rhythms that govern your life follow the church calendar rather than agricultural cycles that dominate peasant existence. Your year is punctuated by elaborate religious festivals that require weeks of preparation and celebration, each one an opportunity to display the wealth and power of your position. Easter, Christmas, and various saints' days become occasions for feasts, processions, and ceremonies that reinforce social hierarchy while providing spectacular entertainment for the masses. As you settle into sleep, surrounded by luxury that insulates you from the harsh realities of medieval life, perhaps you might reflect on the extraordinary distance between your world and that of the people whose souls you guide. The clean sheets, the warm chambers, the knowledge that tomorrow will bring another day of comfort and privilege, all of this represents a form of existence that would seem miraculous to those who struggle with disease, poverty, and social oppression just beyond your palace walls. The gentle rhythm of your breathing, the softness of silk against your skin, the simple comfort of knowing that your every need will be anticipated and met, these luxuries represent the culmination of a social system that concentrates vast resources in the hands of a privileged few while leaving the masses to endure hardships that seem almost incomprehensible from your perspective of comfort and security. As our journey through these 4 chapters of medieval life draws to a gentle close, we find ourselves returning to the comfort of our modern world with perhaps a deeper appreciation for both the distance we've traveled and the luxuries we now take for granted. Tonight, we've walked through chambers where medical torture masqueraded as healing, discovered revolutionary physicians whose compassion illuminated dark centuries, puzzled over mysterious bone houses that transformed death into art, and ascended to heights of privilege that separated the powerful from the suffering masses they governed. These stories remind us that history is not simply a collection of dates and battles, but a vast tapestry woven from millions of individual experiences, moments of pain and discovery, suffering and transcendence, mystery and revelation. The medieval world we've explored tonight contained depths of both cruelty and beauty that challenge our modern assumptions about progress, civilization, and human nature. Perhaps most remarkably, we've seen how different the human experience could be within the same historical moment. While common people endured medical procedures that we would recognize as torture, Persian physicians like Al-Razi were developing humane, effective treatments based on observation and experimentation. While families watched their ancestors' bones transformed into architectural displays, bishops dined on exotic delicacies in chambers heated by precious charcoals. The medieval world contained not one reality but many, separated by vast gulfs of knowledge, wealth, and opportunity. As you settle deeper into your comfortable bed tonight, perhaps you can appreciate the simple miracles that surround your daily existence. The clean sheets beneath you, the effective medications available at your local pharmacy, the knowledge that medical care will be both effective and painless if needed. These represent the culmination of centuries of human struggle, discovery, and gradual progress toward a more humane world. The contrast between then and now offers not just historical curiosity, but genuine comfort. You rest in safety that medieval people could not imagine, surrounded by conveniences that would have seemed miraculous to even the wealthiest bishops of that distant age. Your headaches respond to simple medications rather than skull drilling. Your illnesses yield to treatments based on scientific understanding rather than religious dogma, and your mortality will be recorded in peaceful cemeteries rather than transformed into architectural display. Yet perhaps these medieval voices can offer one final gift as you drift towards sleep, a reminder that human resilience, creativity, and compassion have persisted through even the darkest periods of our shared history. Al-Razi's revolutionary medicine, the artistic vision that created bone house masterpieces, even the complex social structures that supported medieval bishops, all represent human beings striving to create meaning, beauty, and order within the constraints of their time and knowledge. Sleep well, knowing that you are the inheritor of countless generations who struggled, suffered, discovered, and dreamed their way toward the comfortable world you now inhabit. Let their distant voices serve as a gentle lullaby, reminding you that progress, while never guaranteed, is possible, and that the simple luxury of peaceful rest represents one of humanity's greatest achievements. The medieval world fades now into the gentle darkness of historical memory, its mysteries preserved in bone houses and ancient texts, its suffering transformed into lessons that have shaped our modern understanding of medicine, society, and human dignity. Rest easy in the knowledge that while the past contained unimaginable hardships, it also contained the seeds of everything we now cherish about our gentler, more enlightened present. Good night.